Now to O.J. Simpson's estate and new questions after his death about whether the families of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman will get the millions of dollars they're owed.
The man who walked free from a murder trial died owing over $100 million, and his family thought they could keep it all. But here is the twist that nobody saw coming. After 30 years of dodging payments and hiding behind legal tricks, the Simpson estate just agreed to hand over $58 million to the family of Ron Goldman. But get this, the executor who swore just months ago that the Goldmans would get nothing, absolutely nothing, just completely flipped his story. And the reason why will shock you, because there is way more to this than just money changing hands. The thing is, the estate might only be worth $3 million max. So how are they supposed to pay nearly $60 million? And what happens to all the creditors standing in line waiting for their cut? The Internal Revenue Service gets first dibs on whatever money exists. Then comes California demanding $600,000 in back taxes. And somewhere at the bottom of that pile sits Fred Goldman, a father who spent 3 decades chasing justice for his murdered son. But here is what makes this whole situation absolutely wild. Malcolm LaVergne, the executor, actually told reporters he wanted the Goldmans to get zero, and he meant it. But something changed his mind. And when you find out what it was, you will understand why this case is finally coming to an end after all these years. Let me take you back to where this nightmare started, because you need to understand the full story to see why this $58 million agreement matters so much. On June 12, 1994, a warm California night turned into one of the most infamous crime scenes in American history. Nicole Brown Simpson, 35 years old, was found stabbed to death outside her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Right next to her body lay Ron Goldman, 25 years old, a waiter who had simply been returning a pair of eyeglasses that Nicole's mother left at the restaurant where he worked. The scene was brutal. Both victims had been stabbed and slashed dozens of times, and the police immediately suspected one person, Nicole's ex-husband, Wrongful James Simpson. Simpson was not just any suspect, he was a football legend, a man who had won the Heisman Trophy in 1968 and spent 11 seasons dominating the National Football League. He played mostly for the Buffalo Bills and became such a household name that he starred in movies like the Naked Gun series and ran through airports in those famous Hertz commercials. Everyone knew the Juice, as fans called him, but what happened next would destroy that golden image forever. When police tried to arrest Simpson on June 17, 1994, he refused to turn himself in. Instead, his friend Al Cowlings drove him around Los Angeles in a white Ford Bronco, while Simpson sat in the back seat, reportedly holding a gun to his own head. 95 million Americans watched this slow-speed chase live on television. Police followed the Bronco for 2 hours as it crawled along the freeway at 45 miles per hour. People lined the overpasses waving signs, some supporting Simpson, others demanding justice. It was surreal watching a celebrity run from the law in real time, and everyone had an opinion about whether he did it or not. The trial began in January 1995, and it became known as the Trial of the Century. Prosecutors Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden presented mountains of evidence against Simpson. They showed blood found at the crime scene that matched Simpson's DNA. They presented hair and clothing fibers from Nicole and Ron that were found in Simpson's car and at his home. They showed a bloody glove found at Nicole's house and a matching one discovered at Simpson's estate. They brought in FBI experts who testified that bloody shoe prints at the scene came from rare Bruno Magli shoes, size 12, the exact size Simpson wore. They presented evidence of Simpson's history of domestic violence against Nicole, showing police photos and 911 calls where she begged for help. But Simpson hired what everyone called the dream team of lawyers. Johnny Cochran led the defense along with F. Lee Bailey, Robert Shapiro, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, and others. These lawyers flipped the entire case around. They claimed the Los Angeles Police Department had planted evidence to frame Simpson. They pointed to Detective Mark Furman, who had allegedly made racist statements, and they convinced the jury that the investigation was sloppy and corrupt. The defense played on the racial tensions that were already boiling in Los Angeles just 3 years after the Rodney King beating and the riots that followed. Then came the moment everyone remembers. Prosecutors asked Simpson to try on the bloody gloves found at the crime scenes. Simpson struggled to pull them on his hands, and they appeared too tight. Johnny Cochran seized that moment and gave the jury a line they would never forget: "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." The gloves became the symbol of reasonable doubt, even though experts later said the gloves had shrunk from being soaked in blood. And Simpson may have stopped taking his arthritis medication to make his hands swell. On October 3rd, 1995, after only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury announced their verdict not guilty on both counts of murder. The reaction split America right down the middle. Television cameras captured it all. In one frame, you could see African Americans celebrating what they saw as a rare victory against a racist justice system. In another frame, white Americans sat stunned, unable to believe that Simpson walked free, despite what they saw as overwhelming evidence of guilt. But Fred Goldman, Ron's father, was not done fighting. He could not accept that the man he believed killed his son would face no consequences. So Fred and Sharon Rufo, Ron's parents, along with Lou Brown, Nicole's father, filed a civil lawsuit against Simpson for wrongful death. This trial was different. The judge did not allow it to be televised. The jury was not sequestered. Most importantly, the defense could not claim police racism or attack the crime lab the way they did in the criminal trial. The civil trial jury heard evidence the criminal jury never saw. They saw 31 photographs of Simpson wearing Bruno Magli shoes, including one published 6 months before the murders, proving it could not be a fake. They read diary entries from Nicole describing years of abuse and fear. They learned that Simpson had sent Nicole a letter threatening to report her to the IRS just weeks before she died. The entries showed that Nicole had started denying Simpson access to their children and treating him like a stranger. Prosecutors argued this rejection sent Simpson into a rage that ended in murder. In February 1997, the civil jury reached their decision. They found Simpson liable for the wrongful deaths of both Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. The jury awarded $33.5 million in damages to the families. Finally, Fred Goldman felt like he had achieved some measure of justice. His son's killer had been held accountable, at least on paper. But getting Simpson to actually pay turned into another battle that would last decades. Simpson claimed he had no money. He said he lived only on his NFL pension and his private pensions, which under California law could not be seized to pay the judgment. He moved to Florida, where homestead laws protected his house from being taken. When authorities tried to seize his possessions, Simpson sold off items quietly or claimed they were stolen. The Goldmans managed to force the auction of Simpson's Heisman Trophy, which sold for $230,000. They grabbed whatever they could, but it barely made a dent in what Simpson owed. The worst part for the Goldmans was watching Simpson seemingly live a good life, despite owing them millions. He played golf at exclusive clubs. He attended autograph signing sessions for cash. He made nightclub appearances. He even appeared on Sacha Baron Cohen's show, Who is America, in 2018, and reportedly collected $20,000 for it. All of these were cash deals that left no paper trail for the Goldmans to follow. Simpson's former manager, Norman Pardo, later revealed that Simpson used shady schemes to hide his income running cash-only businesses that kept him just out of reach of the judgment. But then, in September 2007, Simpson made a mistake that would finally land him in prison. He walked into a hotel room at the Palace Station Casino in Las Vegas with 5 other men, 2 sports memorabilia dealers. Bruce Fromong and Alfred Beardsley were in that room with items Simpson claimed had been stolen from him. Simpson said he was just trying to get back his own property, including his first wife's wedding ring and photos of his children. But here is what actually happened. Simpson burst through the door with his crew, and someone had a gun. Fromong testified that Simpson screamed, "This all belongs to me. You stole this from me." When Fromong protested, someone pointed a gun right at his face. Simpson and his accomplices took items that had nothing to do with Simpson, including lithographs of Joe Montana. The whole confrontation was secretly recorded on audio by Thomas Riccio, a memorabilia dealer who set up the meeting. On the tapes, you can hear Simpson commanding, "Don't let nobody out of this room," and telling the others to scoop up items. The recordings made it impossible for Simpson to claim it was just a peaceful retrieval of his belongings. Police arrested Simpson 3 days later and charged him with kidnapping, armed robbery, assault, and conspiracy. On October 3, 2008, Exactly 13 years to the day after his murder acquittal, Simpson was found guilty on all 12 charges. Judge Jackie Glass sentenced him to a minimum of 9 years and a maximum of 33 years in prison. Many people, including the Goldmans, believed this was karma finally catching up with Simpson. Fred Goldman even said publicly that their relentless pursuit of Simpson's assets pushed him over the edge and led him to commit the robbery. Simpson served 9 years at Lovelock Correctional Center in Nevada before being granted parole in July 2017. He was released that October and settled into a gated community in Las Vegas. He tried to rebuild some kind of life, posting videos on social media, commenting on sports and current events. But his past never stopped haunting him. The debt kept growing with interest piling up year after year. By the time Simpson died, the Goldmans calculated he owed them more than $100 million. Then in May 2023, Simpson posted a video on social media that caught everyone's attention. He looked thin and tired. He admitted he had been diagnosed with cancer, though he did not say what kind. He said he caught cancer and had to do the whole chemo thing. He tried to sound upbeat, claiming he beat it and was over the chemo. But just months later in February, 2024 reports emerged that Simpson was in hospice care, battling prostate cancer. Simpson denied it in another video, laughing off the rumors and saying he was planning to host friends for a Super Bowl party. But the rumors were true. Simpson was dying. On April 10th, 2024, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, Simpson died at his Las Vegas home at age 76. His family announced his death the next day, asking for privacy and grace during their time of transition. The cause was metastatic prostate cancer, a disease that had spread throughout his body despite treatment. Just 2 days later, on April 12th, Simpson's longtime lawyer, Malcolm LaVergne, filed Simpson's will in Clark County, Nevada. The will had been signed on January 25th, 2024, just months before Simpson died. It placed all of Simpson's property into a trust and named LaVergne as the executor responsible for managing the estate. LaVergne had represented Simpson since 2009 and was clearly shocked by the responsibility. He told reporters, "I am flummoxed as to why he would name me, but he did, and I'm going to take it very seriously." Then LaVergne said something that made headlines around the world. When asked about the $33.5 million judgment owed to the Goldmans, LaVergne told the Las Vegas Review-Journal, "It's my hope that the Goldmans get 0-0. He said them specifically and added, "I will do everything in my capacity as the executor to ensure that they get nothing." LaVergne's anger seemed directed particularly at how the Goldman family had taken control of Simpson's controversial book manuscript, originally titled If I Did It, and republished it as If I Did It, Confessions of the Killer. To LaVergne, this felt like the Goldmans had profited off Simpson's name. Fred Goldman responded through his attorney. He said Simpson died without penance and never wanted to give a dime to Fred. David Cook, the Goldman family lawyer, said they would pursue the estate through every legal avenue available. They were not giving up after 3 decades. But with LaVergne promising to fight them and the estate's value uncertain, many wondered if the Goldmans would ever see a penny. Here is where things get interesting, because just days after making those harsh statements, LaVergne completely changed his tune. On April 15th, 2024, he gave an interview to The Hollywood Reporter and walked back everything he said. He called his 0-0 comment pretty harsh and admitted he spoke out of anger. He said, "Now that I understand my role as the executor and personal representative, it's time to tone down the rhetoric." LaVergne explained that his initial anger was aimed at the Goldman's attorneys, not Fred Goldman himself. He said Fred's personal remarks after Simpson's death had been non-offensive and understandable. LaVergne then made a promise that shocked everyone. He said, "I can tell you in advance, Fred Goldman's claim will be accepted, and his claim will be handled in accordance with Nevada law." He pledged to be hyper-transparent with the families, showing them his homework before even submitting it to the courts. He invited Fred Goldman and representatives from Nicole's estate to meet with him and review the estate's finances together. What changed LaVergne's mind so dramatically? The answer is simple. He realized he was no longer Simpson's lawyer defending his client's interests. He was now an executor with a legal duty to handle the estate properly under Nevada law. As executor, he could face personal liability if he violated his fiduciary duties. He could not just ignore valid creditor claims because of personal feelings. The law required him to accept legitimate claims, pay them according to priority, and distribute whatever was left to Simpson's heirs. If he refused to do his job properly, he could be removed as executor or even sued himself. So LaVergne got to work. He started calculating the actual value of Simpson's estate. It turned out to be much smaller than anyone expected. LaVergne estimated the total value at somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. This included whatever was left in Simpson's bank accounts, his personal belongings, and any other assets not protected by law. It was nowhere near enough to pay the Goldmans what they were owed, but it was something. In July 2024, Fred Goldman filed an official creditor claim with Simpson's estate. He originally asked for $117 million, representing the original $33.5 million judgment, plus 3 decades of accumulated interest at 10% per year. Under Nevada law, any creditor who believes they are owed money by a deceased person must file a formal claim with the estate during the probate process. If the executor accepts the claim, it becomes an official debt the estate must pay. LaVergne reviewed Goldman's claim and realized the interest calculation did not look quite right. He reached out to Goldman's attorneys, and they negotiated. They went back and forth over the numbers, trying to arrive at a figure both sides could agree on. Finally, in November 2024, they reached an agreement. The estate would accept a claim of $57,997,858.12 plus 30 years of accumulated interest. This was roughly half of what Goldman originally requested, but it represented the most accurate calculation of what Simpson owed under the law. On November 14, 2024, LaVergne filed documents in Clark County District Court, formally accepting Fred Goldman's creditor claim. This was a massive symbolic victory for the Goldman family. After 30 years of fighting, the estate had finally acknowledged in writing that Simpson owed them this enormous sum. It validated everything Fred Goldman had been saying since 1997, that Simpson was liable for his son's death and owed the family compensation. But here is the harsh reality: accepting the claim and actually paying it are two very different things. Michael Rafferty, the Goldman family's attorney, made this clear in a statement. She said the executor's acceptance of the claim is a positive acknowledgement of the debt, but it does not constitute payment. She added, "We will continue to monitor the probate process as it progresses." In other words, the Goldmans were not celebrating yet. The problem is that creditors get paid in a specific order under Nevada law. First in line is always the IRS. Simpson owed federal taxes when he died, and those must be paid before anyone else gets a cent. LaVergne confirmed that the IRS filed a claim, and it will take priority. Second comes California, which filed a separate claim for $636,945 in back taxes. LaVergne said California would have to take legal action if they want to collect, but technically they are ahead of the Goldmans in line. Then comes the administrative costs of running the estate itself. LaVergne, as executor, is entitled to fees for his work. He has to pay lawyers, accountants, and other professionals helping to settle the estate. He has to pay for appraising Simpson's belongings and auctioning them off. All of these costs come off the top before any money goes to creditors. Only after the IRS gets paid, after California potentially gets paid, and after all administrative expenses are covered, will Fred Goldman see anything. And remember, the estate is only worth maybe $1 million. Let's say the IRS takes $300,000. Let's say administrative costs eat up another $200,000. That leaves maybe $500,000 or less for the Goldmans, out of a $58 million debt that is less than 1%. LaVergne told reporters that the estate plans to auction off Simpson's remaining possessions to raise as much money as possible. But he also admitted that many items have been stolen or lost over the years. Simpson's memorabilia had been disappearing for decades as he sold things under the table or claimed they vanished. What is left might not be worth much. There was an estate auction earlier in 2024 where some of Simpson's belongings were sold. Kim Kardashian bought a Bible that had belonged to Simpson, paying over $80,000. It was a Bible given to Simpson by her late father, Robert Kardashian, who served on Simpson's defense team. That Bible alone shows how some people still want a piece of Simpson's history, but it is not enough to satisfy the massive debts. Fred Goldman has spent more than 30 years fighting for this moment. He was never really about the money. He said over and over that he pursued the civil case because it was the only way to hold Simpson accountable for killing his son. The criminal trial failed to convict Simpson, so the civil trial became Fred's way of saying, "My son's life mattered, and the person who took it must face consequences." Every dollar Fred managed to seize from Simpson felt like a small victory, a tiny piece of justice in a system that had let him down. But the emotional toll on Fred Goldman is impossible to measure. He watched Simpson walk free in 1995. He endured years of seeing Simpson play golf and live comfortably while refusing to pay a dime. He suffered through the Las Vegas robbery case, where Simpson went to prison for stealing memorabilia, but never for murder. He waited through Simpson's 9 years in prison, hoping maybe Simpson would feel remorse. But Simpson never confessed, never apologized, never acknowledged what the civil jury found. And then, Fred had to watch Simpson get released in 2017 and try to rebuild his public image, posting cheerful videos on social media as if nothing had happened. When Simpson died in April 2024, Fred Goldman told NBC News that it was no great loss. He did not pretend to be sad. How could he be? This was the man he believed murdered his son and spent 3 decades dodging responsibility. But Fred also knew that with Simpson dead, his last chance to get any money from the estate was slipping away. That is why his lawyers immediately filed the creditor claim. They could not let this opportunity pass. Now, with the estate accepting the $58 million claim, Fred Goldman has achieved something meaningful. The state of Nevada, through its legal system, has officially recognized that Simpson owed the Goldmans this money. It is in the court record forever. Future generations who look back at this case will see that O.J. Simpson died owing Fred Goldman nearly $60 million for the wrongful death of Ron Goldman. That matters even if Fred never sees most of that money. But let's be honest, the system failed Fred Goldman at almost every turn. The criminal trial failed to convict despite overwhelming evidence. The civil trial awarded him money, but had no real mechanism to force Simpson to pay. Florida and California laws protected Simpson's pensions and home. Nevada laws gave the IRS priority over victims' families. Simpson used every legal loophole to hide his money and avoid payment. And now, even with the estate accepting liability, the actual payout will be a tiny fraction of what is owed. This is the reality of civil judgments in America. Winning a judgment is one thing, but collecting it is something else entirely. If the person you sue does not want to pay and has decent lawyers, they can make your life hell for decades. They can move to states with friendly laws. They can hide assets. They can structure their income in ways that keep it out of reach. And when they die, their estate might be worth so little that you get almost nothing anyway. Fred Goldman learned all of this the hard way. The Simpson estate saga also reveals something about Malcolm LaVergne's character. When he first reacted to Simpson's death, LaVergne spoke from a place of loyalty and emotion. He had represented Simpson for 15 years. He saw Simpson not as a murderer, but as a client, and maybe even a friend. So when Goldman's lawyers immediately started making claims, LaVergne's instinct was to fight back and protect what he saw as Simpson's legacy and his children's inheritance. But then, LaVergne did something admirable. He stepped back, looked at his legal duties as executor, and realized he had been wrong. He admitted his comments were harsh. He changed course. He decided to do the right thing under the law, even though it meant going against his initial instincts. That takes integrity, especially in a case this emotional and public. LaVergne could have dug in and forced the Goldmans to fight him in court for years. Instead, he chose transparency and cooperation. He negotiated in good faith. He accepted the claim. He promised to work with Fred Goldman's representatives to get the estate settled properly. That does not erase the 3 decades of pain the Goldmans endured, but it shows that even in the ugliest cases, people can choose to do better. As for Simpson's 4 children, Arnell, Jason, Sydney, and Justin, They now have to live with their father's legacy. They grew up watching their father become one of the most famous and divisive figures in American history. They saw him acquitted of murder. They saw him found liable in civil court. They watched him go to prison for robbery. They nursed him through cancer. And now they have to accept that their father died owing tens of millions of dollars to the family of a man most of America believes he killed. That is a heavy burden to carry. Simpson's will specified that any beneficiary who contests the will's provisions will receive only $1. This was clearly designed to prevent family fights over whatever money is left. But with the estate worth so little and the debts so massive, there probably won't be much left for the children anyway. After the IRS takes its cut, after administrative fees, after whatever small amount goes to Fred Goldman, the Simpson kids might inherit almost nothing. Their father's estate is basically insolvent. The bigger question is, what does all of this mean for justice? The American legal system is built on the idea that everyone deserves a fair trial, and that the burden of proof matters. In criminal cases, the prosecution must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a high bar, and it is supposed to be. We would rather let a guilty person go free than convict an innocent person. Simpson's criminal defense team exploited that principle brilliantly or cynically, depending on your perspective. They created just enough doubt in the jury's mind about police corruption and planted evidence that the jury voted to acquit. But in civil cases, the burden of proof is lower. The plaintiff only has to show that it is more likely than not that the defendant is responsible. That is why Simpson could be acquitted in criminal court, but found liable in civil court. The two juries looked at similar evidence, but applied different legal standards. The civil jury decided that yes, it is more likely than not that Simpson killed Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. So in a legal sense, justice was served. Simpson was held accountable in the way the law allows. He was ordered to pay damages. The problem is that justice on paper does not always equal justice in reality. Simpson never paid. He never showed remorse. He never admitted what he did. And now he is dead, having escaped most of the consequences the civil jury tried to impose. Fred Goldman will probably collect a few $100,000 at most from Simpson's estate. That money will not bring Ron back. It will not erase 30 years of frustration. It will not feel like justice, but it is something. It is an acknowledgement. It is a final statement that Simpson owed a debt and died without paying it. And maybe that is the best Fred Goldman can hope for in a system that let him down so many times. What makes this case so fascinating is how it captured every tension in American society: race, class, celebrity, justice, domestic violence, police corruption, media spectacle. The criminal trial became a referendum on whether a black celebrity could get a fair trial in a system that had brutalized black Americans for centuries. The civil trial became a question of whether the rich and famous can escape consequences that ordinary people would face. The decades-long collection battle became a symbol of how the legal system favors those with money and lawyers over everyone else. And now, after all these years, after all the trials and hearings and headlines, the Simpson estate has finally agreed to pay. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is the end of the road. Simpson is dead. The executor has accepted the claim. Whatever money exists will be divided up according to the law. And then this chapter of American history will finally close. Fred Goldman is now 78 years old. He has spent more than half his life fighting over this case. He was in his 50s when Ron was killed. Now he is approaching 80, still fighting, still demanding accountability, still refusing to let the world forget what happened to his son. That kind of persistence is remarkable. Most people would have given up decades ago. But not Fred Goldman. He kept going year after year, lawsuit after lawsuit, seizure after seizure. And now in November 2024, he finally got the estate to acknowledge in writing that Simpson owed him nearly $60 million. It is finally over for the Simpson estate, not because justice was fully served, but because there is nothing left to fight over. Simpson is gone. His assets will be liquidated. His debts will be acknowledged even if they cannot be paid. The Goldmans will get their tiny fraction, and the rest will fade into history. But Ron Goldman will never be forgotten. He was 25 years old when he died. He was returning a pair of eyeglasses, doing a favor for a friend's mother. He was stabbed to death in a brutal attack that shocked the nation. His father, Fred, never stopped fighting for him, and that fight just achieved its final symbolic victory. The Simpson estate finally admitted what Fred always knew. Simpson owed the Goldmans everything and died having paid almost nothing. It is a hollow victory, but it is a victory nonetheless, and after 30 years, Fred Goldman deserves that much. This brings a 30-year legal saga to a close, but I want to know what you think. Do you believe this $58 million admission is actual justice for the Goldman family, or is it just a hollow victory after all this time? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this deep dive informative, please hit that like button to support the channel. And while the Simpson case was a battle for justice, another Hollywood icon is currently facing a battle for his life, surrounded by a family making impossible choices. The full truth about his condition has finally been revealed, and it is absolutely devastating. Click on the video appearing on your screen right now. Family confirms heartbreaking news about Bruce Willis. To understand what is really happening behind closed doors, I'll see you there.